My first doubler is made up, and that's going to make a big difference on that thing. Just having it on there statically stiffens that up pretty good. I've got holes in here where the ribs, both the field ribs here and the nose ribs attach, and I can go ahead and drill those out, put clecos in those, and then I'll drill out here on either side of it and put rivets in there to hold it down, and then I'll wait to drill out these holes for the hinge until after I get everything all together. Well, that one, I had to do it twice because I didn't take into consideration the thickness of the metal in the spar here when I laid everything out, and I laid it out and then my edges here were not long enough to span the full width of this spar here, so I had to redo it. And that break that I got is kind of a pain in the butt because you can't see where your bend line is on there, and I wound up getting it off a little bit, so it's a little bit tighter than I would have liked it, but it's better to be too tight than too loose, as long as it's not too tight. But I'm going to have to wait to put this together. I had to order some steel rivets. I use regular aluminum rivets for all of these things in the field here. This where the ribs attach on, they just use the standard aluminum rivets. But these ones here in the middle, those take steel rivets. And to rivet this hinge on there, I need steel rivets for those, so I had to order some steel rivets. And we got a little setback here, I guess. Took all my riveting tools and stuff down, put them away in the shop and everything when I got done with all that stuff up here. I have to go dig it all out every time I need something and bring it back up here. But I thought I had the right rivets for this, but I get to going through what I've got, and I don't. It takes a lot of number 3 rivets here, and it takes 3-3s and 3-4s and 3-5s. And I've got quite a few 3-5s, but I don't have any smaller ones of these razor head rivets. So anyway, I'm going to have to order some of those. It'll take a little while to get that stuff. Meanwhile, I'll go ahead and get these doublers made up and get everything ready to go together. I've got a pattern laid out here to rivet this doubler on to this spar. So the middle here is going to be determined by what the rivet pattern already is for this control horn. And this is what I use to determine the rivet pattern for this. This page is copied directly out of the AC 4313, and I'm going to use multiple rows here. I'm going to use 3 rows, so this is the pattern that I used. Minimum edge distance is 2D, 2 diameter of the rivet, and we're using 3/32 rivets and 470-3 rivets, which are 3/32. So the minimum edge distance, minimum distance away from the edge for the rivets is 2 times the diameter, which would be 3/16. I used 1/4 of an inch to start. It gives me a little bit more room there off the edge. So like I said, 2D is the minimum diameter. And then the distance between the rows is 3 times the diameter, which is 9/32. And then there's 6 times the diameter for these 2 rows and 3 times the diameter for the middle row. So that's what I've got laid out there. I've got 3 rows on each end. And I actually have some number 3 rivets here. I can take and cut these off to the right length and put these on if I wanted to get this much of it done if I wanted to. Anyway, I'll get this one laid out, get it clecoed on and ready to go, and then I'll go ahead and lay out the other 2. Then I can work on something else. Well, I got those holes all drilled out for the pattern for the rivets on that doubler. Now I decided to go ahead and rivet it on. I took those number 3 rivets that I had. I think they were -5s, and I cut them on my rivet shear, cut them down shorter to approximately 3s, and put them in there, set them in with a hand rivet set. Anyway, that's all done. I was worried about this center section here. It was where it was cracked out there and stuff. It was pretty floppy, and I was afraid that was going to break. And boy, that stiffened that right up now. That is really nice and tight. Oh, I've still got some clecos in these holes here. These are the holes where this control mount goes on there. So I'm going to leave those in there. I got to looking yesterday, and I'd mixed up this polyfiber epoxy primer to spray on that flap, or after I got it cleaned up. And it sat down there in the shop for, I don't know, it's been 3 or 4 days or more, but it was cool enough that it didn't set up. It had a skin over the top of it, and I wouldn't use it to spray again, but I did put a little bit of reducer in there and mixed it up, and then I just took an acid brush and painted over this surface here that we've got covered up with that doubler, just to add a layer of protection in there between those two sheets. So that'll save that. Like I said, I was afraid that was gonna crack and break or something like that, but boy, that strengthened that right up. So I'll need to cut out here where this horn goes in there. I need to make the cutouts for that, but I'm going to wait to do that till I get all the correct rivets and everything, put everything together. Trying to figure out what I was going to do with this one, with these hinges. The one on the outside edge really doesn't need anything. It's got a little corrosion on it, but it's strength in it. It's not really compromised. And this one is pitted through there. That's thinned that metal out pretty good, and it'd probably still be fine, but I just don't like to take a chance on it. So I'm trying to figure out what to do on it. I was originally thinking about putting a patch on it, a doubler, like the one I did on that center section, but it really doesn't need to be reinforced that much. And whatever I do when I come out is going to change the geometry for the holes in these ribs and stuff in there. And if I put something on the outside here on the front face like I did on the center one, these hinges are already drilled and they're bent to go over this outside edge, and so they wouldn't have fit. So I needed to put something on the inside. So what I come up with was this. I've got a little piece of aluminum here, and I cut it just a little bit wider than what this hinge is, than the bracket on this hinge, and I fold it up so that it'll fit inside here. And then I drilled 2 holes in it, in this field of this, in the center of this, and countersunk those out for some flathead rivets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this piece in there like that and rivet it in with some countersink rivets on the face here so it won't interfere with this hinge being mounted on there, and then that'll be in there permanently. And then the rivets that hold this on will go through the spar face here. It also clamps over the top, and they'll go into here, and they'll go through the spar and into this doubler, and that should give it plenty of strength. That should fix that up pretty good without adding any undue weight or interfering any in the geometry of these, the mounting of these ribs here. I said this ribs here on the inside go in there, and if I'd have put anything in there to fill that, that would have changed the whole position and stuff on those. And I'm going to go ahead and put a layer of paint on that just like I did the other one, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other hinge on the outboard end. Right, I got that doubler in there, and I just put it in with those 2 flathead rivets there just to hold it in place, and I put the paint on the inside between them. Now I can put this hinge on there. I think I've got enough of the right rivets and stuff to do it. I went down and looked up the blueprints there, and I printed out a section of it for this portion of the aileron, and it shows using a 1/4 inch aluminum rivet for the sides, which would be a number 4 rivet by 4, and I just happen to have some 4-4s, and then in the middle here where it goes through both layers of this steel, it calls for a 5. I don't have any 5s, but I have some 6s, so I can go ahead and put this together. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and put this together. I'm going to slather a little bit of this paint in there. Actually, I should put it all together first and drill those holes out so I can deburr the holes first. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this on here. It goes on there like that. I get those holes lined up. And that's a number 4 or an 1/8 inch hole, so that takes a number 30 drill bit. I've been using number 40 drill bits. Now these holes up here, I thought about drilling those out and riveting those down, but that little tab goes on there that covers up the top of that, and that goes on there and goes through that and gets riveted on there. I get this all lined up with the holes. I'll drill those holes out, and then I'll deburr everything, and then I'll smear some paint on there and rivet that thing together. That inboard hinge is on there, mounted up, laid it all out on there, the hinge. Then I put that paint on there, thick over the spar and put this back on there. I had some 4-4 rivets, and that's what it called for here on this outside edge. And I went down to get some clecos to hold that on there with, and I got to looking in my stash and I found some 4-5 rivets. I thought maybe I'd use 4-6s in this middle, thinking maybe the added thickness of that doubler on there would necessitate the increase for a little longer rivet, but the 6s are too long. But I happened to find a few 5s, not very many, but a few 5s, which is what it called for this center section. I've got stuff scattered all over here for projects that I've made over the last 40 years. I find them in all kinds of odd places. So anyway, I got to looking again, and I happened to find a few of those 4s for that. And that's what it called for, is AN 470. Actually, it calls for soft rivets. I used AD rivets, which are, what are they, 2117, which are harder, a little harder than the soft rivets, which is fine. It's better to use harder rivets where soft rivets are called for than it is to use soft rivets where hard rivets are called for. But anyway, I got those all put in. Good news, I'll go ahead and do that other one now on that other end the same way. There's the outboard hinge installed. It's all put in just the way it's supposed to. Well, that's about as much as I can do with this for the time being until I get those steel rivets to get that center hinge in and that horn, control horn. I did go over the whole thing and deburred all those holes. Well, I think I'll clean that up a little bit more with some more lacquer thinner or something, wash that out. There's still a little bit of primer on the inside of it, and so I think I'll go ahead and clean that up and paint it with some primer. I've got to clean up all those other parts and stuff too, but I'm gonna mix up some primer to paint that flap anyway, so I think that's what I'll do. Clean that up and then paint all that stuff. Well, here's my version of the former, the shape that goes on the end of that aileron. This gives it its curved shape on the outboard end and fares it into the wingtip. Oh, this is the one that came off there. It's pretty rusty. Piece of 3/8 inch mild steel tubing, 028 according to the blueprints. And this is a piece of 3/8 inch stainless steel tubing, 028. I cut that off of this roll right here. Oh, I still got to trim off the end of it a little bit there where it goes into that trailing edge, but that looks like it'll work pretty good. It's going to be a few days before I get the proper rivets to put this aileron all back together, but that doesn't mean I have to stop working on it. But a real nice day for the last couple of days, so I took all of these parts and pieces outside and worked on it out there. I took some MEK, washed everything down real good and got all the grunge off of it, all of the polyfiber, polytack, polybrush, all of that crap off there, got it cleaned up, and I got the spar all cleaned up and all the holes deburred and stuff on it. These little plates here are covers that go on over the gaps where the hinges are, and they didn't look very good. They had some rust on them and stuff like that. So I went and dug out some 16,000 sheet metal I have left over. I don't have a lot of it left, but I do have a little bit. And these are pretty simple parts, just square or straight edges on them and stuff. Well, I was going to make up some new ones. I decided to go ahead and clean them up. I took them, cleaned them up with the MEK, and then took a Scotch-Brite on my die grinder and cleaned them up, and they actually cleaned up pretty good. And I scrubbed them down in some Aluma Prep and then dumped them in the iodine solution. And I kind of forgot about them in there. I was off doing other things, and I forgot about them, and I would have left them in there all night, except I remembered that I had to go drain the water lines and stuff. The weather's been really nice here for the last week, but it's still freezing at night, so I still have to shut off the water for the outside lines and drain the water lines. And when I went out to do that last night, I remembered these were in the pot still. So they got a pretty good coat of iodine on them, and I think this green here is where the alclad, the pure aluminum, has gotten ground off there or wore off, the pits and stuff like that, and the iodine is reacting with the copper in the alloy in the aluminum. But those are going to be just fine. Everything's all cleaned up now. The last thing that I just did was I notched out this spar where this control horn goes, so that spar is not quite as stiff as it was with just the channel around there. But once this horn goes in there, that stiffens that back up again. But Anyway, that's all notched out and cleaned up, and that looks good. The next thing I can do on this is paint it, I guess. I've got to put another coat of primer on that flap, and I can coat all these parts and pieces here too while I'm at it.